So imagine if Serum or Vital was available for iPad. Insert ButterSynth. Not only is it pretty much going to take care of all of your Serum slash Vital needs, it also has some stuff that is going to stand out on its own that actually competes with owning this over the other two that I think is super awesome. I think this is only available for iPad. It's not available for iPhone, but I don't know if this is available for computer. Let's go ahead and talk about the feature set that this has. I'm going to show you here that the envelopes and stuff are covered because my camera is going to be covering that, but aside from there, it's not really all that big of a deal. As of now, this is the only synth that I know of for iPad that has a wavetable editor, and I want to show you that first because this is so useful for somebody like me who would love to just sit down and veg out and be productive and just draw some wavetables and make them sound super cool and then use them later in stuff like Faceplant. Faceplant has an amazing wavetable editor. I love it. It can do some really cool stuff. This is on an iPad. I get to touch it with a pencil and do some really cool stuff. So let's say we got a pen. We can just grab this and do something like this to create a wavetable. Now, one thing that you might want to do if you ever make a wavetable is you might want to add that first harmonic back in, because that's going to mean that your bass is going to be the most prominent. But from here, we can start to edit this by changing the waveforms. And like, do you see how sick this is? I'm using an Apple Pencil to manipulate this, but I'm just using this here to mess with this, and then I can switch the phases of these if I wanted to, being like, oh, all right, well, let's rotate this here and see how this moves the waveform, which, by the way, this makes a big difference. If you didn't know, I've got masterclasses on bass design if you are interested. So with that, all I have to do now is create another thing here to where I move this over to 2. I'm going to go ahead and hold that in. It's a little finicky on how to draw a new waveform, but once I have that, I can move this and create something new. And now this created a second frame, which is great. So with this second frame, I can kind of either do something here that makes complete utter nonsense, it doesn't really matter, or I can kind of move stuff through. Now what's also cool is this comes with its own set of effects. So it doesn't have the filtering and stuff like I'm used to in Faceplant, but that's quite okay, because really the only thing that the filter does in the first place is either boost or cut the harmonics. So if you wanted to add some filtering here, then what you would do is say I want this to have more or less high end, then I can start to take off some of these here and kind of remove some of those. And then when this kind of opens up, we can say, all right, well, I want this to kind of have a little bit more, see, peakies here. It's pretty much the same thing, so don't worry about that. With that being said, we have phase shifting, which you can see in the background sometimes. It doesn't always do it, but you can see that the waveform has shifted. We've got some comb filtering, which is kind of cool. We've got sample and hold, which will squarify this. Usually you don't want to do that. You can do some gentle wave folding if you want to. You've also got tube distortion, which is great. Frequency boosting, I'm not really sure what that does. Low pass filter, high pass filter, peak filter. So that's pretty cool. I wish that there was a notch, that'd be great. I don't really know what this does though. So we can kind of move that around. And I'm not sure if this is just like a peak filter that has a gain on it or whatnot, but it would be cool to be able to control the resonance and stuff of that, so that way I can do those low mid boosts on these wavetables that you all know that I like to do if you've seen this. So we've got some other tools here, which I think that all of you Serum users are really going to appreciate. Take a look. Resample synth output 16, 256. So I don't think that these are FFTs, but you have different wavetable frames I'm thinking that you can do. You can also save this. Saving wavetables, right? If you've seen the drum computer video, you know that you can import your own wavetables. If you have Drambo, you can import your own wavetables. We finally have something that can make wavetables on iPad. That's why this is a must-own just for this in particular. So I'm going to go save, load save multi. I'm going to go into user, and I'm going to go into tables, and I'm going to go into save. We're going to call this tutorial. Tutorial. Great. Now that we've talked about how to make cool wavetables and stuff, let's get out of this and actually talk about the synth itself. If this was the only thing that this could do for 20 bucks, I'd still buy it because it's definitely worth it. So, Serum, 2 wavetables, a sample engine, a dedicated sine wave FM engine, and a granular synth. The one thing that I don't like about the granular synth is that there's no way to change the shape of the grain. But other than that, what more could you ask for? I'll demo that another time, but I want to talk more so about like what's more related to Serum and Vital respectively. But we can turn this on. So now both of these are working. We can change this into a different wavetable. Maybe. Let's go browse. I was trying to like open it up that way, and that did not work as expected. I'm just going to use a sine wave, and we're going to go to wavetable 1 and go to FM from wavetable 2. Great. We need to turn this off. So we go volume all the way down. And now we can use this as a source of FM. Let's go ahead and add that phase modulation rather. And as you can see, we're pretty much off to the races with creating growl basses and all the things that you want to do. Now, I will say that at a glance, this has a little bit more to be desired for the detuning features that it has. You can change the width here, and you can reset the phase to 0, so that's really nice. And there's also a mix on here, which is kind of cool. I think that should be replaced with blend, but that's fine. So if you set the detuning up, then it'll detune, but it doesn't quite sound in the way that I'm expecting it to be, like voo, 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 right? So you kind of have to play and finagle with it. You've also got this harmonics here. So if you've got too many like crazy harsh harmonics, you can kind of balance the phase mod out with this. That's what I'm talking about. So maybe with this detune here, it does say like almost 100 cents or whatever. But we got what we're looking for. So maybe we can back off of the phase mod now and turn the harmonics back up. So I see. So that's coming from the detuning of the wavetable 2. So in any case, messing with this here, you can see that the behavior of this is a little bit wonky and a little bit different, but it's not to say that you can't get some cool stuff out of it. It's just something that you need to kind of be mindful of. There's 3 different options for wavefolding here as well, so you can kind of mess with that. But you also have some other options with your phase modding, which is bin XY, pulse width, mirror, bit crushing, I imagine, sync, window sync, hard sync. I'm not sure what FMX is, but FM, no clue, to be honest. I'm not even going to bother with it. You can send these into your different filters. So this can go into filter 1 and filter 2. You can set them to serial if you want to and change the cutoff. So I'm just going to hit a note. You can change the filter types here to all of these different ones. That's really cool. And speaking of, there's a bunch of filters on here, which we'll talk about when we get to the effects. But sounds great. Now, I'm sure that your next question, if you're familiar with sound design, would be like, but Alckemy, what about modulation? We'll talk about that. Just give me a sec. You've also got this noise engine over here that you can turn on. Same thing goes into all this stuff to where you can set it to filters and your envelopes. Your envelopes are over here that have regular ADSRs. On top of that, you also have we'll talk about that in a second. You've also got multi-stage envelopes, so you can double click. You've got 4 LFOs that have my favorite, which is random smooth. You can set to speed. Now, I think that unfortunately on these, you can't set them to FreeSync, as far as I know. Let me set that to free run. No, it's still on there. So I haven't found out a way to set this to FreeSync, but this also has an arpeggiator and a sequencer, length, gate, velocity, transpose, step mode division. I don't know, that's pretty cool. It's got an XY pad, and the way that you get to all this other stuff is by, unfortunately, setting it up via the matrix table. It's one thing that I don't like about this synth. There's no drag and drop features, but what you can do is say, all right, well, I'm going to take the cutoff of filter 1 via LFO1 and go to filter, which thankfully this is like very easy to navigate, but we're gonna go to cutoff here. We're gonna set a maximum minimum like this, and now this should move on its own. As you can see, it's doing random from sample and hold, so we want to set that to linear, so that means that it's going to be smooth. And when we use this, we've already created some randomization with this. So I really love the fact that you can stack these filters on here and use different ones. And so what we can do is maybe use a second filter here. I'm going to do my best to not go like super neurobasey crazy today for the sake of explaining this, but I can go back into this, into the matrix here, LFO2, and same thing, filter. And I love the speed of this. I don't know if you all can see this or not, but just the speed at which I'm able to tap this. This is why I bought an iPad, because it is just way different and much more refreshing that I can just sit here kind of like this and just enjoy my time and be like, oh, all right, well, I'm gonna move this over this way and then go back to the control matrix here and manipulate this to be maximum and turn the minimum down. And and with this, we can, again, go back into manipulating the wavetable and creating different variations and doing all this other cool stuff. I have not tried this before, but I do believe that we can we infinite FM this? Oh, let me see. So this is FMing from wavetable 2, but if I haven't tried this, this might actually be really cool. Let me turn filter 1 off. Actually, let me turn both of these off. And let's see if this is going to work. Okay, so I don't think that this changes the timbre, unfortunately. Yeah, so unfortunately you can't like FM to FM. I don't see how that would work out well anyways, but that's still pretty cool. But even still, you can set a different phase mode on this. And now you can see what this is doing. Just a bunch of different cool stuff that I really enjoy using. I'm going to turn this up a bit. This might be loud. Get some fat sounds out of this, and it usually sounds really good. So on top of all this, we've also got an FM operator here. This is very difficult for me to kind of wrap my head around, so I am saying that this is it's the ratio, and this is the volume or the depth. So we can choose between these different chains here, which is not a huge number, but it is cool that we at least have some options. And what we can also do is come into this little wrench right here, and we can say that the FM is not going into the effects, which we'll get into in a second. But with that, what's really cool is that I believe that this will bypass all of the effects. I think it might have something to do with MIDI triggering stuff for the key zones, but I want to say that this gives me a direct out. Which is pretty cool. And if there's not, then I would hope that ButterSynth would add that, because I think that routing and having a dedicated sub is extremely important, especially with this kind of sound design. So as you can see, you know, we can kind of create different operator stuff here and have the depth. But we can change this into different waveforms as well, which is really cool. And actually, if you have single cycle waveforms, which I'm just realizing, then you can actually save this as, you know, a bunch of different stuff. So if you're trying to create like an FM chain or something, then that's pretty cool. Okay, there we go. Feedback. That's what I was looking for. Let me turn this on. There we go. I guess I didn't turn it on. let's see if we can pull up a user file app and go into wavetables. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but we're going to pull up aberration. Yeah, it doesn't work, unfortunately. So they need to be single cycle wavetables in order, or for those to single cycle waveforms in order for that to work, which makes sense. But yeah, pretty neat. So yeah, if you were to do that and then send that into what's called the effects here, then you can pretty much combine these to get a really fat waveform. So we turn this back on, turn this back on. And as you can see, there's just a bunch of options that you can get into with very basic stuff that really caters towards this interacting with each other in a very pleasing and fun way. I wanted to see if there was any interaction that this has between there, and it doesn't look like there is, so I don't think that you can FM anything else from the granulator or the sample engine, but it is kind of cool that this is at least included. There is a unison tab on this. Is there a unison tab on this? I don't think so. Semi-fine pulse frequency, grain length, which is pretty cool, and then volume randomization. So it would be cool if you've got different playback speeds or whatever in order to kind of navigate through this. This is very basic by, I guess, today's standards of what a granular synth can do, but I'm not going to complain. It's a freaking wavetable maker, right? In the shape that pretty much looks like Serum. All right, so finally, let's go ahead and talk about the effects. The effects are a lot. So as opposed to just a few in Vital or Serum, we've got all of these. And I'm not going to go over each and every one of them, but what I really like is that you have multiple filters. You've got a dedicated compressor, you've got a dedicated OTT, which also has this limiter on here, so you can set limit on all of these. You've got pocket verbs, which is like a small reverb. I'm not really sure if this is a feedback delay network, but it kind of seems like it is. Let's turn the LED up all the way. It's not really doing a whole lot, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Let me come into this and turn this on here and see if this is going to confirm my suspicion of whether or not this can go directly out. It is. Okay, so that's really cool. So this does dictate whether or not this goes into the effects or not. So I am going to turn this back off. Wavetable 1 and there are going into that. Let's go ahead and take this oscillator and move that out of the way. And we've got a nice kind of cloud verb here now happening. So if I were to move this to, come on, bruh, you gotta hold it for a sec. Now, one thing I wish about the OTT in particular on this is you can see that you can move these, but you can't separate them for where you have upwards and downwards compression. And the reason why this could be useful is because it basically changes the ratios of these. And so if you split them apart, there might be a middle ground that you might not want to compress that's untouched, to where, like, you know, once it passes this lower threshold, it's going to do downwards compression. When it passes this threshold, it should be opposite actually, but when it passes this threshold, it's going to be upwards compression. When it passes this threshold, because you guys are watching me through a camera, it'll be lower compression. If that makes no sense, then don't worry about it. But unfortunately, there's no way to control that, so maybe in a future update, that would be really cool. But you've got a bit crusher, you've got pretty much, I think this is like a pedal distortion. So you've got an amp on here. You've got a classic reverb, classic delay. You've got an EQ. Unfortunately, this isn't parametric, which I wish that this would have been. That's okay though. Let me back off of some of this stuff because I'm not trying to make this absolutely crazy. But what is cool is that even though these filters don't have a visual, you've got some Z planes on here. So Z filter, low pass, which sounds really good actually. Yeah, you can see that you can drive them really hard. You've got a mix tab, which is dope. Then you've also got a regular distortion that chooses between a few different types here. So I'm not really sure if I put this on a clip, if that'll actually clip the signal. We should probably try, but I can't really see where if there's an output or like a thing on here to figure that out. I guess it would be right here, but yeah, so if I turn the volume up on this, we need to see if alright, so there's not really any way to tell because this does go into the red, but it doesn't tell me what's actually happening. So like there's no way to read that. So the best way to figure that out would be to open this up in Drambo or Logic Pro or your DAW or whatever, but we'll figure that out another day. Anyways, yeah, there's a bunch of things that you can use here. It would be really cool if this could open up and be used as a wave shaper. But it is pretty cool that, you know, from setting this clip on here and then turning this up, you can kind of, you can mess this up pretty bad in all the best ways. And I encourage you to, because this is what is so sick about this, is that you can assign all the crazy modulation to this. You can assign your multi-stage envelopes, your randomizations, and all that. So with that being said, I know that I didn't cover all of the effects, but I mean, there's a lot to go over, but I mean, this is $20. So $20 synth that you can use on your iPad with an Apple Pencil, sit on your couch, put some headphones in, make a dope synth, make a wavetable, then send it to Bitwig Studio or whatever DAW that you use, and you are good to go. And then you can save this as a patch. You get what I'm saying? Like, this is, again, I cannot stress enough how useful some of this stuff is if you are a sound designer, and how refreshing it is. Like, even though I'm at my desk, I'm covering a video, but I can be laying on the floor stretching while I'm making wavetables. I can be cooking dinner or something, you know, with an Apple Pencil, or watching something. Like, I can sit over on the counter while I'm making sure that my ramen isn't overflowing or something while I'm making wavetables, right? Or I could be having a conversation with Corey to where she's doing something, you know, maybe she's doing her cross stitch or whatever, and I'm sitting next to her and I'm making these wavetables, but we're sitting next to each other and not in a chair. I could take this to the park, realistically, right? I can do this at the airport. It actually makes sense to do that now. The MPC Live is great, and not to, you know, make a weird comparison, but it's a big lunker thing. Or, you know, sometimes I don't want to bring my laptop around because that's my baby, and, like, you know what I mean? If I lose my laptop, then I might be screwed. But the technology that's available within all this stuff is highly, highly capable now. And when you start to throw this kind of stuff inside of your DAW, even as a preset, and then you get into like processing it with Drambo even more and doing this and that, then you are in for a really good time. Which, by the way, it might actually make sense for you to do it that way as opposed to doing the modulation here. So you got all this stuff, which is pretty cool. It might make more sense to close this, open up something like Drambo. Drambo's number one for me anyways, and I'm going to close out of this and move this out of the way. But I could open up Butter Synth. We've got an external thing. I'm going to need to pull that off of that. I'm going to go Butter. Open this up. Go into Map now, and now anything that I want to control, say this, let's say I wanted to add some effects, so we'll go filter 1, 2, and 3. I can turn on the map again and go bang, boom. Oh, you can't modulate these. So maybe that wouldn't be a good idea then. Learn something new. You can modulate some stuff, but I guess that those effects are not there, unfortunately. So yeah, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to continue to explore more about this as I learn about it and see if there's some other workarounds from there. I'm all about efficiency, and I really don't like having to do 50 steps to get one thing done. But one thing is for sure, the wavetable editor inside of Butter Synth is awesome, and that alone is why I think that you should consider it if you are a sound designer. I'll see you guys in the next one. Please do me a favor, like the video, consider supporting the channel, and know that I appreciate you. Bye, everybody.